Didn't happen. There's no way.
What about the people who died?
There's no way they're still alive.
She even hired a lawyer and tried to sue the university. But all of her appeals failed, and Amy was told that by the end of the semester in 2010, she would no longer be able to teach and that she was being fired. All of Amy's colleagues breathed a sigh of relief because they thought, finally, she's out of here. But unfortunately, Amy had other plans. And this is where we get to the tragic events of today's case. On the 12th of February 2010, around 3 p.m, Amy Bishop entered a staff meeting with fellow colleagues and staff members from her department at the university. There are around 13 other people in that room as well as Amy. Now, the other professors were really surprised to see Amy there because this meeting was about the following semester and Amy wasn't going to be there the following semester. She had been fired. So it was very awkward. The other professors were like, okay, why is Amy here? But they continued on the meeting, just acted normal. And normally Amy was very vocal in these meetings. She was very confrontational. She would always talk over people. But this meeting, she was very, very quiet. Inside the room was a fellow colleague called Deborah Moriarty. Now, she had become friends with Amy, even though no one was really friends with Amy. They had formed some sort of friendship. They had bonded over similar interests and similar lifestyles. They bonded over their kids and over grandkids. However, Deborah had voted against Amy in her tenure application, so things between the two were a little bit awkward. So 40 to 50 minutes had passed. The meeting had gone on as normal, but it was coming to an end now, and Amy had not said a single word the whole meeting, which was definitely very weird. Another thing that was extremely weird about Amy is that she was carrying a purse. Now, Amy never carried a purse anywhere. So when the meeting ended, Amy got up out of her seat. She moved in front of the door, blocking the way. She then reached into her handbag and pulled out a gun and just started firing at her colleagues one by one. Amy first aimed her gun at the man running the meeting, Go Peeper Dealer. She shot him in the head, execution style, killing him instantly. She then aimed her gun at another colleague, wounding them but not killing them. Amy then shot two more colleagues in quick succession, Adriel Johnson and Maria Davis, and tragically both of them would lose their lives. She then aimed her gun at another colleague, shooting them, again wounding them, but they would survive. And everything that I have just said there literally happened in the space of 60 seconds. This whole thing was chaos. The terror inside that room is unimaginable. Some of the colleagues managed to dive under tables to avoid the shots, but they were all completely helpless in that room. However, it was at this point Deborah, who was Amy's ex-friend, saw an opportunity to possibly stop her. At this point, Deborah was under a table and she could see Amy's legs. So she reached out and grabbed her legs, trying to shock her, trying to knock her over in some way, but it didn't work. Amy just shook her off, and then Amy turned her gun and pointed it at Deborah. Deborah was literally staring into the barrel of the gun. She was expecting it to go off at any minute, and then Amy pulled the trigger. But the gun jammed and the shot did not fire, and Deborah was still alive. Then Deborah, quick thinking on her part, she saw this as an opportunity to actually stop Amy, because the fact that Amy's gun had jammed startled Amy and it kind of took her out of the situation for a couple of seconds, and Deborah started pushing Amy, pushing her over and over again, trying to force her out of that room. And she managed to push Amy completely out of that room and shut the door. So now Amy is not in the room. The rest of the colleagues that are able to get up on their feet and block and barricade the door so Amy cannot get back in, because they are all terrified that Amy is going to somehow fix the gun and come back into the room and start shooting them all again. But thankfully, Amy wasn't able to fix the gun. She just calmly walked away from the scene. She actually went into a bathroom and disposed of the gun. She then walked up to a random student who, I'm sure that student did not think that she was the shooter. She walked up to this random student, asked to borrow their cell phone. Amy then phones her husband and says, quote, "I'm done." And then she asks her husband to come and pick her up from the campus. Now, at this point, the police were already on the scene. They had received numerous phone calls from a lot of people on campus who had heard the gunshots, and so many people were fleeing the campus. It was total panic and mayhem. When the emergency services were on the scene, they quickly attended the conference room to tend to the wounded, and 3 people were injured, and very tragically, 3 people had lost their lives. Following the arrival of the police, they were informed of the identity of the shooter, so they were scouring the campus for Amy Bishop. They knew who they were looking for, and they actually quickly found her because she was just stood outside of the campus, like at the back of the campus, calmly waiting for her husband to pick her up. And Amy was immediately arrested, and it was at this moment that a photographer managed to get a photo of Amy just as she was being put in the police car, and you can see in her face she has this cold, dead stare. She's just so creepy. There just looks like there is no emotion there whatsoever. Police also had to investigate a potential bomb on the campus as well. People had become concerned that Amy had booby-trapped the science department with a quote, herpes bomb. You heard that right. Herpes bomb. Now, Amy had done some research into the herpes virus, and they were worried that she had made a chemical bomb from the herpes virus in order to spread herpes around the campus. However, the police found no evidence of this, and the investigation into the bomb was closed. But to be honest, given Amy's past, I wouldn't be surprised. Amy Bishop was then taken into custody and charged with 3 counts of capital and 3 counts of attempted murder. When people first heard that there was a mass shooting at the university, people's minds immediately went to a student on student attack. So then Amy's case went to trial, and she tried to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. But she wasn't exactly insane, was she? Let's be realistic. Her defense realized that it wasn't going to work. So in the end, Amy did plead guilty, and she did that because there was a deal on the table that if she pled guilty, the death penalty would be taken off the table. And then after she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole,